like to do roll call. We're ready?
Yes. Mrs. Elba,
Here.
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mrs. Moomin,
Here.
Mr. Freeman,
Here.
Ms. Mitchell.
Here. We can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. We're at item 1.3. If we can have a motion on the floor to approve our agenda for this evening.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion for 1.3, approval of agenda for May 2nd, 2019, work session board meeting.
A second. Thank you. It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? If none, Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mrs. Moomin,
Yes.
Mrs. Elba,
Yes.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. We're at the point in our agenda where we are at 1.4, public participation. Did we have anyone that completed a public participation card, Dr. Rock?
No, we did not.
If not, then I would like to welcome to the floor Mr. Steve Zanoni. As we've been talking board, he has promised to provide us with in-depth educational opportunities for us to better understand what's taking place with these monumental facilities, construction projects that we have going on. So he did provide us with PowerPoint presentations that he also has up on the screen. Hi Doug, thanks for coming. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for letting us do this today. Not only am I going to present, but Doug's also going to present. And I'm actually kind of excited about doing this because I think it's really important for you as a board to kind of understand some of the processes. Now, I can tell you, I'm not going to get through everything tonight. And so I've kind of tailored it for this evening. I would like to come back a couple of more times. I'd like to come back next fall, and because that's a key moment when we're going to be doing a lot of things in segment 2. And then I'd like to come 2 more times as these kind of type of work sessions in 2020, because I think that'll give you a full gamut. And what I'm trying to focus in on today is sort of the key board decisions that you're going to make in the short term and some of the long-term ones, and kind of walk you through the process. And I'm actually going to take you a little farther back. I'm going to sort of take you back to when we started even in segment 1 on Randallwood. It just kind of as a primer, kind of let's walk us through. And so, and as part of this presentation, in the middle of it, hopefully you'll understand GMPs by then. We'll then talk about GMP2 for this project, and then we'll continue on with our workshop. So I kind of integrated it into the presentation. So I think it might be helpful because it rather than wait until the end, rather than doing it within the presentation. And the reason we're here, let me just make sure I got this right, is, you know, obviously to do an overview of the design and construction process, but really more to have a discussion of what is the board's role through this process. And I know we've sort of hit you with a lot, and we're going to continue to hit you with a lot. We're going to be here every month. And I know, especially when we had the commissioning agent, everybody's going, what is this and why is this? And I think that was the impetus of, hey, maybe we need to all sit down and kind of walk through this process. And so I really want to talk about, and I really want you to quiz us about the board's role and what you need to do. So don't feel free to ask any question as we go along. And so in terms of the agenda, we're going to first walk through, there's our wonderful building, which we have.
Thank you.
And in terms of the agenda, we're going to do an what's the agenda slide? Let's make sure. Get this right. Ooh, I guess, well, it's in your packet. We're going to walk through segment 1, the new Randallwood Elementary design and construction. We're going to talk about the schedule that's happened in the past, what we've completed and what's to be completed, what you as a board did during that process. So I think that's kind of nice to understand, hey, we did approve this. We did do that. It's kind of like there's just so much, and it happens in such a long period of time. We're going to really talk about best practices, and one of the key elements for tonight is budget management. I think this is one of the things that's very difficult when we keep coming in front of you to say, hey, we want to have this consultant, or we want this GMP, and we're going to present to you a draft of the segment 1, which is the Randallwood budget, and which will eventually be the actual costs. And it's a document that's going to be used throughout the process, and we'll update it on a once-a-month basis. And I think this will be helpful for everyone to know where we're at. And it's really critical to the process. The reason we don't produce that at the beginning is we really need to get through these GMPs. We're very close to our third one, and once we have that, we'll know all our costs. We'll then try to walk through segment 2, and as I said, what I'd like to do is go through questions and answers and questions as we go along. Okay, so let's talk about where have we been with Randallwood? Well, we went through a process called pre-construction. And what is that? Pre-construction is basically everything that we need to do to do a building project. And what did that consist of? Well, we selected consultants. If you recall, quite a while ago, we selected people such as the architects, and we'll go through who we've selected in a moment. We then also went through what's really critical, which is called the Program of Requirements for the Randallwood building. And what does that mean? It's a combination of what the vision would be in terms of the education delivery in the building, and then it also was the actual spaces, a listing of all the spaces that we were going to do. And it was through that process that we discovered, if you recall, that we were short some of those spaces that we really needed. We saw that there was a need, and we put money then into segment 2, if you recall, because of that program. When we got through the program, we discovered that, hey, we don't have enough classrooms. Well, was it anyone's fault? No. What it was we were using the state's format, and the way they put their number of classrooms, they have less kids per class. And second, we had this real upsurge of number of students, which was over 300 during that period. So the combination of both caused us to relook at the program. And if you recall, we put dollars into the segment 2, into the bond issue for that. And so that was good. I mean, we discovered we had something missing. We found a solution of how to do that. Then we went through schematic design, which is when you got to see and you approved what it sort of looked like, and those were the big renderings and all of those pieces, how it was going to be laid out. That was reviewed by a lot of people within the district in terms of teachers, principals, facilities people such as technology, which was really critical. They looked at all of those elements. From that became the basis of drawings. And there are 2 sets of drawings that were done, which was one, the schematic design, which is as the first part, which really kind of lays it out basic, but then it was called design development. Now, I didn't bring the drawings, and maybe I should have. Those kind of documents are over 200, 300 sheets of drawings that they represent. They're very detailed. They're designed for construction and how you construct a building. And from those documents, and if you recall, it was during the design development phase that I came back again and asked for more money, if you recall. We found that we had a shortfall due to the market conditions, and I hope you all remember these. But I think it's kind of good to kind of go back and say, where were we? When we got to design development, we discovered that the project was pretty high in terms of costs. We did find ways of getting more dollars, again, using the segment 2 dollars, which were already available to us, plus Dr. Rock and myself are looking at some other alternatives, which we're looking at. Now, that was all based on estimates. When actual costs come in, if they come in lower, we won't use those dollars for those uses. But we do have the dollars available. And what happened is we started this whole process, which you start getting hit with, called the guaranteed maximum price. And we'll talk about that. And you've already approved the GMP 1. And what was that? That was basically to do the demolition and abatement of the buildings and to get the site ready. We now have GMP 2, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, which includes the building shell and envelope and windows and all the pieces that make it into a building. And then there'll be GMP 3, which will be used for basically all the insides, mechanical systems, all the finishes, all the pieces and parts inside the building. And we'll go through that. Why do we do that? Which is one of the big questions often is asked. So if we go to the next slide, we're talking about construction. And what have we done? We've mobilized, we had abatement and demolition, and now we're going to be starting the actual construction. And right now, per the schedule, we see construction completed approximately sometime in November of 2020. Occupancy would be sometime in November, December of 2020. And what we call closeout. When you build a building, you can't just, you take it on. There are a lot of things that need to be, make sure they're working correctly. And we go through a closeout process. And what we do is we actually hold back quite considerable amounts of money, about 10%. Before we release that, we want to make sure every system is working properly. That's where our commissioning agent will help us, especially on the mechanical, the electrical, and the plumbing. So we have all of those pieces. So that's what we're looking at. But we'll have students in the building when we're closing it out. That's very normal. It's not unusual to do that. So that's where we're at right on construction. Now, you've selected a lot of consultants. And first of all, I want to ask, are there any questions? Okay, this is going a little faster than I thought. Okay. Well,
I have one.
yes, please.
How many consultants do we have?
Okay, that's perfect. Let's go through this list. If you see consultants to hire,
Oh, okay.
okay, that's great. You're right on track. It's called Segment 1. It's, did you find it? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, you have the owner's rep, which
Right.
we represent. You have the architect. And the architect also includes visioning, but when we say architect, it also includes a full set of engineers, which would be a mechanical engineer who would design the mechanical system. We have an electrical engineer who designs all the electrical systems. We have a plumbing engineer who handles all the plumbing and fire protection, anything that's in a pipe. We also have a technology consultant, but all of those consultants sit under that architect, so we didn't have to have separate contracts for all of those. We now have also a construction manager, and they're the ones who are responsible for construction. Again, that simplifies the process. All the trade contracts, the subcontracts, will be under them. So we don't have to go and approve each of those sub-trade contracts. It has simplified. In the old days, before there was CM at risk, the methodology was multi-prime. You as a board would hold maybe 20, 30 contracts. It becomes very cumbersome and also involves a lot of risk because all of a sudden you're the construction manager instead of someone else. State allows us now to do this. Then there's the commissioning agent, which you all recall. We selected the commissioning agent. And commissioning agent's job is to be independent of the architect and the construction manager. And what they do is they go to the site. First they look at the drawings, but then they go to the site and they say, hey, is this being installed correctly? A good example is I had a project where the commissioning agent discovered in mechanical systems they have dampers that open and close. Well, the dampers were put in incorrectly. They were reversed. And so when they were opening, they were supposed to close, so it was just causing havoc. It was the commissioning agent who discovered that well before there was a problem. Their commissioning agent will also look at the exterior skin. They will do a whole series of studies as it's being built, and then they will do where they use infrared cameras, and they will make sure that those walls aren't giving out too much heat or not taking in too much cold. And so that's important, including the roofs. And so that's one of the things I think the state has done a very good job. So those are the ones that we've completed on this job. We have 2 more that are going to come your way, and we see those sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Oh, okay.
And that would be, the first one is the maintenance plan advisor. What is that? This is a great tool that the state requires on all school projects that they co-fund. One of the problems, you get this wonderful new building and you don't know how to maintain it. You don't know what kind of costs are going to be involved in maintaining it. The maintenance plan advisor puts together a overall maintenance plan for the 27 years of the costs of the building. They will put together a budget of what that will be, those costs per year. And they will provide some information such as for the district, so they're kind of like ticklers. This year, you're supposed to check check the sprinklers. This year, every 6 months, you're supposed to put change out the filters. And so they'll put an overall maintenance plan. Why does the state do this? Their concern is oftentimes you build these buildings, they're helping fund it, but nobody's maintaining it. And this is really a great tool. And it actually keeps your costs down because it's being maintained. There's also another reason why you need to maintain the building. A lot of the warranties will not hold unless you're doing proper maintenance. So they have these things called O&M manuals. So these are operating manuals for every piece. A good example, you cannot maintain the warranty on the sprinkler system unless the heads are checked once a year. And so you have to make sure that's done. So if you have a problem with head, the first thing they're going to ask, well, did you check them each year? You get a piece of paper, it shows, yes, these were the dates it was done. The same with mechanical system. If you're not changing the filters per the operation manual, you're going to lose your warranty. If you're not doing inspections of roofs on a yearly basis. So this maintenance plan provides all that information. It's a great tool. And so that's a piece that will come out sometime. Why do we do it a little later? It makes more sense once the project is well designed. They're really basing it all on documents that we receive from all the contractors, which include warranties, O&M manuals, all of these, and they build that plan. The other is, and I'm not sure we're going to do this, but I put it on the list, is the possibility of a move consultant. As you know, we're moving 3 schools into 1 school. This is going to be quite an operation. So the good news is we're not moving furniture, but every teacher has a lot of materials. And oftentimes it's good to bring a move consultant. We like to recommend that to help them purge a lot of materials so we're not moving stuff that's not necessary to be moved. Also coordinating that move in terms of timing. It may be done all by district personnel, but the move consultant can help us identify what dates we should be doing this, in what order. Are we doing all 5th grades? Are we doing all 1st grades? Are we doing it based on the 3 buildings? How are we moving that material? And it's really materials that we're talking about. Move consultant can also help us in terms of some of the technology that we may be buying ourselves, which is for savings purposes, and make sure that gets coordinated into the building. So your question is, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consultants. We've done 4 of the 6, and so we're going to come back to you for 2 more for this segment. Now, I'm going to tell you some bad news. We got to do it all over again when we get to segment 2. I mean, we start out, please.
Just, could you run through, if you know?
Yes.
Who the architect is, construction manager?
Yes, oh, sure.
Can you tell me the names?
Yes, our
Yeah.
architect is GPD,
All right.
and but they are also teamed with Madison
GP.
Consultants.
Okay.
And GPD, it's kind of an interesting way set up. Madison is a local, I've known Bob Madison my whole career, is a great firm. They're doing practically 50% of the work. GPD did design work, and Madison's office did all of the construction documents. And then Madison's office will be the ones who will be doing the field reviews. That is, they go out in the field. They also will do things such as, these are good questions, actually. I'm glad you asked me this. They will also, as you build it, every contractor has to provide you with information on what the materials are that they're using. So let's say we want a certain, even though we said you could use 3 different lock sets of types, they have to provide a submission that shows the lock sets that they're going to put in and has to be reviewed by the architect. And so it's quite a big job to do, and including the structure and all of those pieces and parts. So that's the first one.
Excuse
Yes.
me 1 second. I thought we had asked for that list with a brief blurb on who does what.
Yes.
So that we would have that. Is that included
No,
anywhere?
it isn't, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
I must apologize. It's my fault. I did talk to Leslie from my office, who was assembling the list, and I went away and I didn't get that. But we'll get that next week to you,
Okay,
and we'll have it
that
sent
would
all
be helpful.
directly. We'll have their names and addresses and telephone numbers.
Yeah.
Okay,
But more importantly, as we had talked about, just a high-level overview of what they do.
Yes.
What their responsibilities are in the
We-
project.
We can do that.
Okay.
We can do that.
Thank you.
So the AE team, but I'll go through a summary of it
Right.
right now. The AE team is responsible for the actual design and then all of the documents that the design is put together with. The
One
s-
more question.
Yes, please.
I understand that we have 4 consultants in place, correct?
Yes.
How often do you meet with the 4 consultants?
Well, later on in the presentation, I'm going to talk about that.
Okay.
But we meet with them at a minimum every 2 weeks.
Oh, every
At a minimum. But we do meet more often than that, all right? And we'll go through that.
Okay.
And but that's a good question. They can't get out of, we need to sit down with them quite a bit.
Okay.
Right now, in this period, we're meeting once a week.
Okay.
During this pre-construction, it's just before we're putting these GMPs together.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll go through that, the different
Okay.
types of meetings that
All
we
right.
have. That's a great question.
All right, thank you.
Now, let's talk about the construction manager. That's Infinity Construction. They're located here in Warrensville. They have a partner, which is Coleman Spahn. And Coleman Spahn is really geared toward the mechanical systems on the piece. But what does construction manager do? They basically will bid out all of the work. They break it up in numerous packages, and I think we have a representative. We have Sean here, who's our project manager. It's broken up in multiple packages. They have a minimum of 3 bidders. They have a requirement to make an edge requirement, an MBE requirement, a minimum of 15%, which they've been making, and they'll probably exceed it in the end when we get to the 3rd GMP. And so they're managing all the construction, and all of the construction contracts will be under them. So we don't hold any, we just hold one big contract, which are these GMPs, that says this is what it's going to, and it's based on the drawings. The next is commissioning agent. That's Osborne Engineering. And if you recall, we brought that in front of you. They're a local, very large engineering firm here in Cleveland, probably one of the oldest. They have they do everything from bridges to big, very sophisticated buildings, but all the engineering aspects of it. So that's our group that we have today. Any other questions? Great. Okay, let's go to the next thing. Well, we also have a state partner. And you know, some districts hate them, some districts love them. I think they do provide a benefit to us. This is a partner who's built school buildings throughout the state since 1999. That's the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. But what does it mean to us? First of all, no matter how small the amount of money they give us, we are required to follow their requirements. And they're very specific on how they require things to be done. Very specific on how we select it. If one of the things I think that's very important, we talked about the architect and construction manager and the commissioning agent. Now, one of the things is, we as the owner's rep, I wanted to make sure it's all clear to you. They have no control over us, PMC. You hired us independently, and so we represent you, the district. We do not represent the state, period. And there's a reason, and I'll go at the end of this list why. It's important to have somebody who's going to fight for you, who can fight with the state. Now, I don't consider it fighting, but makes them reasonable, all right? So we're required to follow all their processes. So the OFCC does do some really good things. They review and approve all aspects of the project, but that means that they're involved in the consultant selection. And we have to use their process. They have a scoring sheet we have to use, all right? We have to go through a RFP first, which is a request for proposal. We then have to sit down with the state and break that down to a smaller group, which then gets request for RFQ first. First, make sure they're qualified, we shortlist them, and then we go through an RFP process. They set up all the formatting of how we do this. And so part of my job, or the job of PMC, is making sure that the district's wishes are being met. Sometimes they can just railroad you through into something and really not someone you want, or someone who doesn't really represent well to the district. And we had a very good process, both with the architects and with the construction manager, but we were full participants in that. And we limited, one of the things that we did was, they like to have everybody score. I made sure there were more from the district scoring than from the state, because I didn't want to, it's our job, it's not their project. Yes, we'll follow their rules and their processes, but we want to make sure that we have our voice is said there. So they have good example is, the hardest part is when we get to some of these other consultants. The difficulty was with the commissioning consultant. There, they pre-qualify the commissioning consultants. We have very little movement of who we can select. We did push them to select someone local, but you have to pick somebody who is on a predetermined list. It's not done through an RFQ and RFP process. And so we were very limited on who was selected for the commissioning agent. I'm really pleased we got somebody local. A lot of times they wind up with somebody out of Columbus, and they're not here a lot. We need them to be very agile as the construction's going on. So that's good. The next will be the maintenance plan advisor, is done the same way. We have to select based off their list. Again, I'm going to really push for, let's get somebody local, because we want to be able to keep their feet to the fire. We want to find them. We want to have them provided to us. Now, they also approve all contracts and change orders prior to you as a board approving them. So a good example is we did GMP 1. They actually approved it first before we approved it. Now, our office did, and Don and Dr. Rock were both participants in that. We did the review, but they have to approve it first to make sure that it meets all their standards. And so we went through that process. So we're having GMP 1 that happened that way. GMP 2, it's the same way. They have the approval first to make sure. Now, it is not the official approval. It is the approval of their state representative. And his name is Dennis Kaplan, and he's a really good guy, and he really works with us, and he really, I will tell you this, he's very interested in the district, making sure we're not overspending. Mm-hmm. And he questions all of the numbers, and Sean can tell you that straight on. They're constantly in discussion. And one of the things that's been really a great feature is he has visited the district once a week. And he goes to Infinity's office. He sits down with them on a weekly basis. So he is here on a weekly basis. So it's not like somebody out of Columbus. And so he lives nearby, and he's done a lot of districts in Northeast Ohio.
Actually, he's a graduate of Warrensville.
1973.
74.
Yeah. So his heart's in the right place. His heart's in the right place. But he needs to prove all those. When I today bring in front of you a GMP, he has reviewed it and approved it. We would not bring it in front of you. Nothing worse than to us approve it and then he's not on the same page. Now, we approved it together with PMC and with Don and Dr. Rock, but we don't want to bring something to the board that the state is then going to say no to. Now, if there is a conflict, which we've had in the past, between the district and the state, that is one of the key roles that we at PMC are playing for the district. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, all right? Probably the one most noted was segment 1, where they did not, or segment 2, they did not want us to get started. And we kept pushing back and forth. We had discussions, and we finally, as I said, we came to a resolution. We did, yes, at first they said, we can't do it, can't get you started. Well, that was really hurting us in terms of timing of the schedule. What's important, we're now in the process of the POR, which you approved, the hiring of the consultant, who's also doing the visioning. We want to do that while the kids are still here, this during the fall, during the end of spring, and all the staff is here. And we worked out a compromise. They allowed us to hire the consultant, which is great. We're going to have a program of requirements. And so when we start selecting architects, here's the really great news. We got those services for about $50,000 less than what was originally going to cost us. So we've already have a savings on segment 1 in terms of consultant fees.
Segment
Segment
2.
two.
On segment 2, thank you, on segment 2. And it really makes a huge difference, and I don't know if some of you have been to the first visioning we've had this week. We had them earlier in the week, Monday and Tuesday. They were very successful. I will tell you what really makes the difference, the way this consultant works. And I sat on one of the groups, having the students there, I think makes all the difference in the world. The students who are participating are leaders. They lead each of the table groups, which is really great. And I think I've learned more about what their needs are and what's important to them of how they are educated than any other program I've ever been in. And usually these visioning do not include students, and I'm just really pleased. I don't know if, Don, you want to comment at all about the participation of the students?
The students have been very active participating. We had 8 middle school students, and I think the high school students varied between 6 and 4.
Correct.
Based on work. But the students were very actively engaged. They participated fully. Like Steve said, they were leading the groups, and they were giving some great insights on what they thought should go into the school.
Yeah, it's been great. So, but that was a piece of conflict that we had between what the state wanted us to do, and they wanted us to wait, and what we worked out a compromise. Now, they can be reasonable. Now, we've had some other issues in the design of the building, and these have been things that I've been working with Dennis on. We had some issues of technology, of what we wanted to bid to, and we worked out a compromise. There are meetings where it gets a little bit heated between myself or Doug and Dennis, and we sometimes go in another room, we work it out. But what's important is making sure that the district's voice is heard. That's the one thing. The state can come in here and just bowl you over and just say, you know, we're doing it our way. And that's been one of the key elements. Now, if you look, are there any questions on this?
Who is the owner's rep?
That's us,
That's,
Doug and I.
Okay.
Yes, PMC,
all right. I see project
and
management.
project management consultants.
All right, you too.
That's okay. Then, what does that mean? They provide some best practices that I think have real benefits to the project. And these are benefits we would recommend. And they include LEAD, which is leadership in energy and efficiency and design. They do commissioning. I know we had a little bump in the road on selecting the commissioning agent, but you know, doing the building, looking at the building envelope, the mechanical systems, the life cycle review is very, very important. And that really adds a lot. They also provide some project management software. Some people like it, some people don't. I do like having a centralized system, what's called OAKS. And that's how we sign off on things. Eventually, when we sign off on this GMP, it'll go through that OAKS software. The other is BIM, and Doug, if you want to mention why don't you go through some of this?
So I want to start with the visioning session. The first thing I learned was one of the most difficult ways to learn is with a lecture. So we're all set up here as a lecture, but we'll try to make this, like Steve mentioned, with as many questions as
Good
we have.
memory.
So these best practices, these are things that we have to do, but they are truly best practices. They build in checks and balances so that we have between the construction team and the design team and the engineers and our office and the owner, everybody's looking at these different items from different perspectives. The building information management system, it wasn't around 10 years ago. With the technology we have with computers, it has come a long way. And what this is it starts with the architect. They actually build the building as a model in the computer. So as they're coordinating with all of their mechanical engineers and plumbers and everybody that they have, they can put the systems in the computer to make sure that the rooms are sized right, and that we don't have conflicts. So then after they design it, then that model actually goes over to the construction manager. And the construction manager with their contractors, they actually build the building in the computer before we order materials, before they start building anything. So all of the coordination that we used to have in the field, a lot of that is avoided because it's a lot easier to handle it and troubleshoot it in the planning stage. So the building information system, we've already, Infinity's already used it as part of the site work when we were looking at how low we need to have to do the demolition of the caissons, so that we could coordinate that, so we didn't have any conflicts with all the underground utilities, because they actually knew what the heights were and they could put that all together. So that's a great tool to help as we plan and actually build the project. And then, of course, Steve talked a little bit about the maintenance plan advisor. But these are all really good practices that we need to do. And then a little bit about our office and how we help with this whole process, the communication, as you brought up. So from a team level, the architects and engineers, they're talking daily. And then now as we're getting into construction and actually as we do the planning, the architects, the construction manager, daily conversations.
Okay.
We're copied in all the emails, so we see all the communications. And one of the biggest things that we need to drive for is to make sure, as an owner, you're providing timely decisions to the team so that we don't stagnate, at all. So the way we do that is we're close enough to the project to see where the major issues are, what decisions are. We have bi-weekly meetings, with the whole team. We meet weekly with superintendent, with the treasurer, so that they're aware of all the major issues. We can escalate them to the board if it's time critical. But that's one of the ways where we try to communicate. We also, as I mentioned, we have the software tools that are in place so that we can see all the costs of the project and all the decisions that need to be made. Beyond the core meetings, we are also going to have monthly updates, and maybe it's twice a month. If we have requests, if there's questions, if there's issues that come up, we'll come here so that we can present the ideas. And one of the things with our best practices, Steve, early on in the project, setting it all up, we're working together. But as we get more and more construction, you're going to see me more often. And what I'm going to do is when we make the requests, and they just had another board tell me that they only see me when I'm asking for money, but that's kind of part of the role, is to make the decisions of the board as to, if we're going to do the changes. But I'm going to show you some things tonight where I want to show it to you the same way. So there's a consistency, because really the management of the money and the funds, to me, is the most important thing. We have a quality team. We're going to have issues on the project. We'll have to work through them. But at the end of the day, it's the cost that we need to make sure that we're within the budget and we're getting everything that the district has. So the way we do that, I'll get into a little more information about. So issue management, as we see the issues that come up, we try to escalate them. When we come to you, when we go to present the issues, I'm always a fan of actually sharing options. So as we meet, we'll see what different options are so we can make some decisions. And then when it actually has to come up to the board, we'll be able to show you all the history. And if we have to have photographs to help communicate it, if we have to have matrix or cost or whatever information, just to make sure that you understand and you're comfortable with what we're asking for approvals for. As we get into occupancy oversight, it is amazing. And one of the things is the architects, and I'm an architect, I practiced before, they have a lot on their plate, and they can design the building and everything else, but they don't necessarily know everything that it takes to get the owner into the building, right? Same thing with the construction manager. Infinity's been through this before. They're going to be fantastic. But what we're going to try to do is we're going to help to make sure that we're doing everything, the technology, from the communication to the faculty and staff, so that we can really, to have a successful project, we need to be able to open the doors when we need to open the doors and have a smooth transition into the building. If there's any questions, feel free to jump right in. So as we talk about costs, and just as Steve started to explain, we have pre-construction and we have construction. So pre-construction is really the design, and then of course, as we get into construction. Well, we manage the budget the same way, so that we go ahead and we have what's called soft costs, which are kind of the design costs. So our architects and engineers, some furnishings might be in it, some equipment, some printing, some of the business aspects, operational aspects, those are all soft costs. And we actually have a soft cost contingency. So the contingencies are for items that we're not sure about. We know we're gonna come up with things, they're gonna be costs. We don't know exactly what they're gonna be, but we know we're gonna come up with some items. So what we do is we have a contingency, and then we manage that contingency. And as we develop the project, we'll show you where we are on the contingency. If we start to get low on the contingency, then we might need to make some adjustments. But as long as we're always tracking that, we're never really gonna get into big trouble. Yes?
So what percentage of the overall project cost is this particular contingency?
For that particular contingency, I think it's about 2.5% to 3%. And these are being developed. So right now, as we're putting this together, they're kind of targets. Yeah.
When we show you the document, the draft budget, you'll see the actual dollar amounts. It's 200 and some thousand.
Yeah, right. So that actually might be closer to 2%, right?
So
Yep.
how often do you usually have to go outside your budget? If you got a fixed budget, how
Right.
often do you
Hopefully,
require?
hopefully never. What-
Oh, okay.
So what we do is, we put together a budget,
Okay,
right?
Mhm.
Based on the funds that are available, and then we manage towards that.
okay, so you kind of
So-
stay,
Right, so
Okay.
when we have major issues early on in the project, so
Mhm.
we make some adjustments, and we try to figure that out.
Okay.
But what we'll get to is, ultimately, it'll be about the contingency. And it'll
Okay.
be about kind of how we're spending the contingency and making sure that we have a contingency throughout the project. The hard costs, those are the bricks and sticks, Infinity, all of their trades that they're bringing on. And that's about 75% of the total budget goes towards the construction. So along with that, we also have a hard cost contingency. So as we come to make a request for change orders, we'll say, okay, this was our target, this is what we had funded for our hard cost contingency. And if we're asking for some money out of it, this is the drawdown, this is how much we have left, okay? Contingencies there's multiple contingencies we have in the project. And I think let me fast forward to that. Yeah. So before we get into all of those details, so as we talked about the contingencies on the budget, okay, there are several contingencies within the project. First is your owner contingency, and we're gonna break that into the soft costs and the hard costs, so that we'll manage both of those. We also have a buyout savings contingency.
the
So
what
right-
type of,
Yes,
what was it? The second one?
buyout
Oh,
savings, yeah.
It's on your sheet.
okay.
1.1. The next one over.
2 sheets.
Oh, it's in here.
Yep. Just one more.
Oh, here it
There
is.
it is. So these are the.
Conti-
What the buyout savings contingency is with the GMP, one of the biggest risks that the owner has to the project is the bid risk. Okay, so we're putting together estimates, we're designing towards a budget, but until we actually get those hard bid numbers, we don't know exactly what it's gonna cost. So with the GMP, when we have an early GMP before it's finalized bid, then that is on the construction manager at risk, right? The first 2 GMPs that we've asked for, we've actually bid out, so we actually knew what the hard number was and everything like that. If the bids came in and they were below what the estimate was, what the GMP was, then we would have a contingency, that delta. And so that delta can come back to the owner for other alternates that you might want to have, or to increase your contingency budget, okay? And then if it's above, then that's the risk that the construction manager has, and then that's their responsibility to cover those costs, okay? And then there's the CMR contingency. So with the risks that the construction manager has, they have an agreed upon percentage for their CMR contingency. And they can use that contingency. They need to have the owner's approval for that. But if they have a trade contractor that has a problem with their construction, if they go out of business, or if they have defective work or something like that, and they need to use some of their contingency to fix that, to support that contractor somehow, they can. If there's a schedule issue and they need to accelerate the schedule, if they need to pay to have people come in for overtime or something like that, they can use that. So there's a couple different items that they're allowed to use their CMR contingency for. But that is built into their contract. And then as we go through the project, if we find that, hey, everything's going really smoothly and we don't have any problems and we don't think we're gonna use it, then the contract allows us to ask for some of that back, and then they can choose to say, yeah, we'll give you some of this back. At the end of the project, when we close the whole project out, any CMR contingency that they haven't used comes back to the owner, right? So we try to manage that so that we can put it into the project, or in this case, it might go to the next phase.
But why did you mention, because you just went through this at Cleveland Heights,
Yes.
which I thought was really kind of interesting, and you kind of fought to get that money,
Right.
because the construction manager is holding a lot of these dollars. Why don't you tell me a little bit? It's public record,
Right.
so-
Yeah, it is. So for that project, we're getting closer to the end, and we have been asking, and we haven't drawn down on any other contingencies. We've come up with some issues on the project, and we knew that they still had some risk. But as we get closer to the project, I don't want to have us close the project out and get $500,000 handed back to the owner. This is the last part of their project. We have other issues that we'd like to put money into, rather than using PI funds or other issues. You know, we have a team in place, and they have a momentum, so we want to try to improve where we can. So we had several requests, and then we finally really forced the issue. Said, I don't see how you're gonna spend all this money. We don't see that it's in their best interest to finish the project and give the money back to the owner, because we wanna spend it. So we were able to go ahead and negotiate out, and we got we have about $200,000 back now, and we're gonna have another discussion in a month, and we'll have another drawdown in a month, so we're kind of managing that. But then we could immediately take that $200,000 and put it to something else that the owner wanted to do, that had some financial constraints on it, you know? And so really, and that's part of our role, is to make sure that we manage that. So contingency use, and these are really, another way to think of this is basis of change, and we try to explain those because I think that's helpful. I used to be an owner. It's always one of the things is, well, why are we making the change, right? We designed it. What did we change that's gonna cost us more money, right? So, and unanticipated requests by authorities having jurisdiction. So as we have city reviews, as we have fire inspectors coming through, this is very common. We have the codes and everything else, but as they're gonna respond, they're gonna walk through and they're gonna wanna have some different things. So there's usually some change orders associated with that. Usually they're pretty minimal. We've been meeting with the city to make sure that we've met with the fire chief to make sure that there's no major surprises and everything. But I guarantee you that there'll be some devices and some minor things that we'll have to handle. Unforeseen conditions, we've already ran into this, and this will be a bigger item, you know, as we get into the high school. Whenever we take an existing building and we partially demolish it and we try to build new to it, there are gonna be things that we couldn't anticipate, and so there'll be some change conditions for that. And then as an owner, you have the right to make changes. We have, you know, if there's some technology changes, or if there's, you know, different changes in furniture, whatever the condition might be, if there's a new program, or maybe there's a change that we need to have, so we can have owner request changes. And then one of the biggest ones, and I don't mean biggest as in a high percentage, but it's the one that kind of everyone's real curious about or has a different perspective about, is errors and omissions. And what that means is when the design team makes a mistake, right? And nobody's expected to be perfect. They do have insurances, but we track that so that if we come to you and say, okay, this is a change, we have to modify this piece of mechanical equipment, and there's a cost to it. And the reason for the change is it was a design mistake by the mechanical engineer, right? We keep track of those, and if we notice, you know, just Steve and I talked a little bit about, you know, what that magic number is. There's an industry standard that says, you know, could be up to 4% where you're expected that there's going to be some changes that are errors and omissions. We start to give above that, then we go ahead and we talk to the architects and engineers about, you know, whether they're going to pay for it, whether there's going to be an insurance claim, or those kinds of things. But those are things, and we've had it happen a couple times in my career where I've had to go for an insurance claim because it was a major mistake. You know, had some other ones where it was, we negotiated it out, so it was just a deductible that they were able to pay, and we could get it all resolved. But it's something that we'll manage. But the biggest thing is, as the owner, you've hired everybody to do this project for you, right? So all of the money that's going to the project, all the mistakes, all the successes and everything else, you kind of own. And so it's a tough thing, and when we come, we'll have honest discussions about it. But there isn't really a contract that says if the architect makes a mistake, then they need to pay you for the mistake that they made, okay? What the contract says is we don't pay them to figure out what the solution is, right? So if we had, as an owner, if we went to them and says, listen, you know what, we have a donor, we want to do a new wing to the building, we want you to design this. We would pay them for those extra design services to do that work. If we found that they made a mistake, say they forgot a mechanical system, they have to design that mechanical system. It's an error and omission, and we don't pay them for that. And then, so that's the first level, and then the next level is if there's an insurance issue, you know, that we can talk to them about. But there's really no, and I have this discussion all the time, and it's kind of a conception that I just kind of wanted to talk about early on in the project, okay?
I can ask a quick question. Can you just clarify again, unanticipated requests by authorities having jurisdiction? Did you say that, as an example, could be like the city
Yep.
stating, like what the
Oh.
district did with the planning commission and stuff? Okay.
Yep,
All right.
yep, exactly.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
And that'll come up late in the project as we're doing our punch list. We might have, the chief might walk through and says, wait, I need to have more signage or more exit signs or those kinds of things that we need to have some changes to add.
Okay.
Okay, so, I know this is a lot of information, but I'm gonna go into even a little more detail with the budget, okay? And a lot of this stuff, I just want you guys to be comfortable that we're managing the details of the project, and we can share those with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is the larger sheet.
much bigger. That's how Sean need to do. See, Sean? That's what you need to do. Just messing with you, dude.
I'll be here, excuse me, I'll be hearing that joke for the rest of the project.
I'm sorry.
So the best way that I try to manage the project is first we have a budget, okay? And that budget we create based on the funds available. And that's what our target is. And as long as we are always managing to our target, then we don't get in trouble, okay? But then, as we start to make awards, we can start to fill in what those actual numbers are. So we're still early on, you know, with this GMP request tonight, we're asking for about half of the commitment to the project, right? So some of these numbers are real numbers, and some of these numbers, like the GMP 3 that we have under construction costs, what that is that's kind of where we need to be to stay within budget. So as we're designing the project and everything else, that's what our target is. So this budget sheet is kind of a summary of where the costs are going in the project. And we have a construction costs, and then below we have the soft costs. And so you can see where we have the different GMPs that we have at the top, And then those GMPs, as you'll see tonight, and as we've seen before, you know, they consist of the construction manager personnel and of their construction management fee and of their construction management contingency. And then also below that, we actually have the owner hard cost contingency that I was talking about. So right now, we have a target of $566,000 as what we have available for changes, okay? Then below, we get into the soft costs, and then you can start to see some of the hard contract numbers that we have in place, some of the items that we're kind of projecting, but we put all those costs together, and we kind of know where the project needs to be. And then we also have the actual soft cost contingency at the bottom of that at $251,000. Yes,
What is COW?
cost of work.
Okay. Pretty simple, thank
I got a question, Doug. Most of these, costs came from some of the bid outs from Infinity?
Yes, yeah, like the actual GMP 1 and GMP 2 that we're gonna see tonight.
Those are-
Yeah, those are real numbers.
Okay, that's why.
Yep. Yep.
So the construction cost, which is 28 million, a little over, close to 29. Yeah, 29 million. Separate from the 2 million for the soft cost, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. So then we have at the bottom, we have the total. Yep. So then as we're managing the costs, as we develop these numbers, what we're really gonna be managing is the contingencies. So, you know, I'll show you that in the next slide. Okay? So I can do updates of where we are big picture, but what we're really gonna, we're gonna just kind of, we're gonna manage the small pieces so that we make sure that we don't get into big trouble.
Oh, okay.
Did you have a question?
No, I think you answered it already.
This is just a draft of this, but one of the things that's important to know is we've broken down, we have to break it down between what the state co-funds
Mhm.
and what we're buying. And so that's why there's a number of columns, and eventually you'll see the breakouts between those two items.
Yeah.
And I think there's one other thing we should point out. There are a number of alternates that are based into the budget. The reason we're doing these alternates is because the state asks us to do that, because the state, one of the great things, I can't tell you what the amount is, but the project manager for the state is gonna go back and ask for more money from the state for all projects. The reason being is, and that's why we've been breaking it down between the co-funds.
Mhm.
He has discovered that because of the problems that we see with the marketplace, that their original budget was probably too low. And so they're looking at giving us more money. And so that will help us a lot. And we're talking about six figures, so we're talking about some good dollars. But he needs this always broken down. When we drive our construction manager crazy on this, we need to show what the state is paying on the co-fund. You can't mix it. You even can't mix any enhancements in it. But he is gonna go back, and I've talked to the state already, to other people within the state, and they have assured me that they're gonna find some more money for us. I can't tell you the amount, and we probably won't know till probably by the end of the summer. We'll know what that is. But that would help us, rather than using some of our funds from segment two.
Correct.
We could use those things.
So let me ask the question. So last night, I was at another meeting, and there's 10 schools that are building schools. And they stated that the state said that they were tapped out as far as providing additional money, because some people had asked, when would they be issuing out the money? Do you know when they'll be issuing out the money? And if they're saying that they're tapped out, how are we going to push them for more money?
Well, first of all, they're tapped out from doing more districts. That's where the tapping out is. We just made it through. We're getting our money in July in front of the commission, and they've assured us they have the money. I've talked to the state, the money is there for our project, but they also put together money for all those projects that are out there, such as ours, some additional funds for the mistake that they made in their master planning when they put their original budgets together. But I will tell you, a lot of districts are very upset. I mean, this is not good right now, because they are tapped out. And the reason they're tapped out is because more districts have approved their bond issues than they expect. They usually expect about an 80% passage. Now they're getting 90 in the past 3 years. Well, it's just, they only get so much money per year. What they did was, which is unfortunate, they're using the tobacco money settlement for that. A number of years ago, somebody got this clever idea, let's sell bonds against that, all right? So now we're not getting directly those funds, and the way they set up the bonds is they only get so much money a year. So they don't have that big hunk of money to pay. What they've done is they've sold these bonds. They've done it, and Mike could probably, they probably did it because they were having problems with other budgets within the state, and they kind of moved money around.
It's a cash flow perspective.
Exactly, thank you. So, but I have to tell you, so we were really concerned at the beginning of the year. I was, Dom was, because they came back to us and said, you can't get started. And we're saying, well, wait a minute, we just passed our bond issue, and they're saying us, well, we can't get started because we don't have the state, we don't have our money. If we don't have our money, you can't spend your money. Well, we really worked. We kept going back down there. We worked out. We said, hey, we'll spend our money first, and you can bring your money later. Luckily, when the new governor, and what happened was, this was because there was a change of governors. One governor leaves the mess to the next guy. And so, fortunately, the new governor did see this. He then allocated funds enough to at least get the projects that were to be funded, that were approved back in November, to be actually funded. But we're in a different position because we have a lot, we're not getting a lot from the state. I mean, we're getting 12 million, it's substantial in this next piece. But some of the other projects, some of the other districts get a lot more from the state, or they didn't do a lot of LFIs. They can't start their projects at all because the state doesn't have their money. We just are very, very fortunate. We're lucky.
Are you saying, because again, in the meeting last night, they said that out of the 10 schools, no one can get started yet. So are you saying that we're gonna be only the one out of the 10 that's gonna be starting?
No, those 10 are different positions than we are.
Okay.
There are a lot of others. There's about a dozen districts across the state that are getting funded like us. So we're not alone. They're not just funding it. Believe me,
Oh,
we'd
no,
be.
I know. I mean,
yeah,
I know
but could you imagine
they named
if,
off the 10 schools that were,
Yes.
that were getting funding.
Yeah.
But they also said that they were tapped out. So when you said that there's additional monies, I'm just wondering, from them to say there's none, for you to say that there's some, I'm just curious.
Well, there's not additional monies for those districts to get started. But there is enough money for the districts. They made the determination based on, and I'm not an expert at this, how they determine us, in the process. But, they kept putting us off for 3 years. I don't know if you're aware of that, to get this money. And so we finally got in position where we can't get knocked out. That would be like what happened to us 2 years ago. We were ready to roll, we're ready to do everything, and then all of a sudden they came back to us and said, we don't have the money. And that's what's happening in those districts. But I think it's a good question. I mean, I have to tell you, we're very fortunate because they really do have a funding issue going on right now down there. Thank you.
So I'm going to give an example of the way you'll see a change order. And I know Steve's been doing it a certain way, and we'll continue to do that. But as we actually get into sharing, how we track the details of it, this is kind of the format that you're going to see. And I use the example of one that you've already approved. Last month, we came to you and we asked for the approval for the change order 1. And so what you can see with this is we have in the upper right-hand corner the target owner contingency. And so we'll match that with the overall budget, right? So as long as we're matching all of those numbers, all of our changes we're going to control out of that target. And then we have the change order, we have a description, and then what we do is we manage the cost for the project as soon as Infinity sees an issue, we're gonna say, hey, what do you think it's gonna be? And we'll put a forecasted number down, right? Even though we don't know the details of it, we know it's gonna be something that's gonna be a cost. Once we actually have the number that they provide to us, we can put that down as pending, and then after the board approves it, we'll put it down as executed. So as soon as we have issues, and so what this does is it helps us manage the big picture of the project as we're going through it. So we might have a lot of forecasted changes that might never come to fruition, but we want to make sure that if they do, that we're okay, you know, from a project standpoint, right? Now, as a very general rule of thumb, we can kind of track the costs with the schedule. So if we're halfway through the construction schedule and we've already spent 80% of our contingency, then we know we have a problem, right? So, and it's one of the ways that we can challenge and we can make sure that we're not adding anything to the project, or just to really have a good feeling of the project, of how well the project's going, or if it has some challenges. So this is a real simple form, but this is kind of the way that we'll have the change request to you, so you can see it. And again, we go over with the superintendent and with the treasurer, you know, before it even comes to you, so there's a comfort level with what we're doing. But then the big picture is, as we have remaining contingency, whenever we have a board request, you'll see what we have left. So you're not making a decision in the blind. You can actually see what the big picture. And I know it's been challenging because as we're developing the project budget and putting all the pieces and stuff together, you haven't really seen it. And that's just because we're still working to kind of get that big picture all kind of locked together, okay? Do you have any questions with that? Sometimes we'll put together, we'll have some photographs, if that helps with the conditions. And we'll have kind of a description, if that helps, so you understand what the changes we're requesting.
So I'm not quite sure that I'm forming this question the right way, but what I'm keep thinking about is like fixed costs. What of this budget is like considered a fixed cost?
So, well, right now, the GMP 1
And 2 are
GMP
fixed
2,
costs?
those are fixed costs.
Okay.
Yep.
We had an estimated amount for them initially, though? Or-
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And they came in pretty good. And actually, one of the things that we didn't talk about, but as we describe what's in GMP 2, the request we're gonna have tonight, one of the unforeseen changes that we found, and one of the ways we had to deal with the soil conditions, is with the RAM aggregate pier. And so what we were able to do, instead of managing it as a change condition, Infinity was able to go ahead and put it into their bids. So we have a competitive bid number, and so that's in it. So if we look at our design, and we do this all the time, so we have our design estimate, which is what we thought it was gonna be, we compare that with where the costs are. So it's a little more difficult to compare that because we've added, you know, that changed condition, you know, within it. Yeah, but the numbers, at first they came in, they were 15% below.
And that's kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, it was-
wondering,
yeah.
you know, if you've got a budgeted amount, and then now you've got the actual amount, how does that come
Yep.
into play, the savings or the increase?
Yep.
Okay.
And so this new GMP we have is actually paid in within budget.
Oh,
But
okay.
we added scope to the project, which we just ran here. So what happened was, there was savings on other pieces within the GMP, and that's funded the change condition. So we're not using contingency to pay for this. Which is
Gotcha.
really good.
That is good. I understand that.
It's really good.
Okay.
There will be another change
There will be
order that'll
another one.
come.
We will use contingency, but
Okay.
on this one, at least we got it within the confines of the.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions with change management? We'll continue to go over it, but. Okay.
Pretty good job. How's he doing?
He's doing a pretty
Good, doing an excellent job, actually.
Very good. He heard me enough.
So guaranteed maximum price.
Is he red?
So tonight, we're gonna ask for the GMP 2 requests, right? We asked for the first one, and I talked a little bit already about some of the risks that the construction manager has with the bid, and why they have contingencies that they have in the project. But this delivery method actually frees up the owner in a lot of different ways. As Steve was mentioning before, we had this delivery method, and this is probably a complete refresher for a lot of you, but I think it's important. We've chosen this delivery method because it does give some freedoms that an owner didn't have in the past. One of the biggest freedoms is we've already selected our construction manager, right? They're a great company. They have good relationships with contractors. They know what the pulse is going on with the construction. And when we go out to bid, they pre-qualify bidders so that they already are inviting bidders that we review and approve that we know are going to be able to handle the project. We're not asking a company to come in, or we're not getting a bid from somebody that can handle $1 million worth of work, and we're asking them to do $3 million worth of work, right? It's already right-sized. So a lot of those risks automatically go away, and it gives us some freedoms as we're awarding the project, because they've already selected kind of a team, but we're still competitively bidding it, so we're still getting competitive numbers, and we're still making awards that are appropriate for the project. So that's a good part of it. The other thing, as Steve mentioned, is as the owner, you have one contract with Infinity. And they're gonna have, you have 20 different trades by the time we get done with this? You know? 33 packages. So if they have any problems with any of those trades, that's up to them, right? We don't hold all those contracts, right? And so we go ahead and we deal with Infinity. I will still challenge them and everything else, but that's one of the benefits. So the changes that we come to you, they've already negotiated with their trades, and it's kind of feeding up, right? And then they also they'll have different ways to manage the project with costs and everything, but basically by having them selected on the project, there's some benefits to that, okay? Why do we have multiple GMPs? Well, as we talked about the pre-design phase, you can imagine if we're gonna wait until we have the entire project designed, that's time where we could have been building, right? So as we started design, the first thing we did was we did the abatement and demolition package. So Infinity could get started, they could tear the building down, and they could abate it and tear the building down while the architects and engineers continued to design, right? And so this request that we have tonight is actually gonna be, okay, now we have the building down. Now what we wanna ask is we wanna ask for coming up out of the foundations. We wanna get our concrete, we wanna mobilize on site. We wanna get some of our site utilities going. We wanna do our masonry, we wanna do our steel, we wanna do our roofs, we wanna do our walls, right? So we ask this request, so then once that's awarded, then Infinity can go ahead and they can start to mobilize all their trades so that they can start to do their submittals. We can go through the award process where they need to mobilize, do the submittals, start ordering the materials so that they can start construction. And at the same time, the architects and engineers are continuing to develop the design for all the interiors, for the more detailed of the technology, of the finishes and those kinds of things. So then that'll be in GMP3. Okay, so the reason why we do multiple GMP is so that we can shorten the overall project, okay? So I talked about a lot of this. The first GMP was $1.1 million. The request that we have tonight is $9.9 million. And we'll have a little more detail of what that entails. But basically what we're asking for is, now that we have the building down, we want to kind of build the shell of it, okay? And then the third GMP that we'll request, and this will be a couple months, will be for the rest. There'll be all the technology, perhaps the furniture, we might break the furniture out. That's another way where we can manage the budget. Some of these items we can maybe find another way to buy, or the quantities that we can buy, but we try to make the big decisions early on. If we can postpone some of those things, then we can see really where we are on the project budget to finalize some of those other ones. Okay, just like we do with alternates. Any other questions?
Just yet.
Okay. So the GMP that we're requesting tonight is put kind of a summary with the costs, with the edge participation. So what this means is, as Infinity has met with their contractors, They're builders that they're bringing on. They have gotten commitments from each one of them, and so they can tell us that we're gonna be managing towards 15% edge participation. And we're actually protected from bid risk, as we've talked about earlier. And as Steve mentioned, Dennis from OFCC, he's already kind of give verbal approval of this. It's already been put in the Oak system, so that's kind of being managed, but the state has approved this, okay? So any discussions?
You thought we'd throw this in the middle, or kind of sit better, rather than waiting to the end and kind of asking, because we talked about GMPs, and you did receive it earlier in the week, and we were wondering if you have any questions. And I also put a full GMP document in front of you, so you can, it's that other document, that, so in case you had any questions or comments.
Thank you.
And the, you know, it basically, if you look at the very front page, it summarizes the work. And basically, it says, you know, it's 9.9 million, of which 7 is LFI, which is basically what we're responsible for. And it's broken down into cost of work, which includes the construction stage personnel, it includes the general conditions. What is that? Well, construction stage personnel, these are the superintendent who's gonna sit on the site and is gonna manage the contractors that are gonna be on there, plus a project engineer that's gonna be on site. General conditions, what are those? Well, those are the cost of the trailer. These are items that don't go into the bricks and sticks, but you need them to build. We need some power on the site for this trailer, for a place for everyone to work out of as they're on site. It may include also some dumpsters and things like that, which would be in there. And then we have the actual subcontracted work, which is 9.1 million. This construction manager does have can ask to self-perform. In this case, they're not. If there is a case of self-performing, they still have to bid it. And so it's still a bid process that they'd have to go through. And then there's a contingency. This is what we talked about earlier. This is their contingency, but it's our money, and they can't spend it without our approval, and that's for, let's say, one of the trades gets behind, and we need to accelerate, things of that nature. And again, this is the dollars that we talked about, that Doug talked about. As we go along, we try to capture back if it's not used. And then those two are put together, and the two together, then their fee, which is based on 2% of those numbers. And there's a form below. It's a table, basically shows the previous GMP, the increase is this GMP, and the amended amount, which would be combination.
So I have a question.
Please.
So, I'm a government employee. One of the positions that I had was helping adapt homes for the individuals that we work with. But, so you guys are referring to this as guaranteed maximum price. Is that the same as like a phase? Like this is the first phase of it? I see here where you're saying GMP1, abatement, demolition, site grading. That almost sounds like what we had listed as our first phase. And I'm just trying to break this down to layman's terms for me. And then the second phase for us might have been like doing the electrical stuff, things
Yes.
like that. So is that kind of
It's
where
very
we are?
It's very similar. We're buying it by phases.
Okay.
So that's probably, let me make sure you understand, because I think you described it really well. You have a phase, the first phase we do this, and the second phase we do electrical when you do that work. We're buying it by phases.
Okay.
So each buy is a guaranteed buy. That's, it
Gotcha.
can't exceed that number, all right? So the first phase that we bought was the building demolition, the abatement, and getting site ready.
Okay.
And they guaranteed the price for that. And there's actually a contingency in there, which they used a little bit, and I'm hoping that we get it back, some of that.
Okay.
Let's get too loud. So now we have our next phase, all right? Next phase is the building shell, they call it the envelope. And basically, the reason we're doing this by phases is to allow then this work to proceed because it helps us on the schedule. And so this is the building envelope. This is basically the foundations, the building structure, which is a steel structure. It is all the exterior walls and windows and the roofs. It's getting completely, the envelope enclosed. It encloses the building. And then the next phase, just like you described, will be for everything inside the building, the mechanical system, electrical.
Okay.
Now, there are projects where you do only one phase, you just buy one GMP. But the reason we're doing this is because of the schedule. So it is like a phase.
Okay.
And it's just a phase of the construction. You gotta build the envelope first before you can
Right.
start doing any of the
Gotcha.
inside.
Okay. All right.
Any follow-up?
So we also had compliance inspectors. So compliance inspector for this project would be, was that the commissioning agent? Do they help with that?
Well, yeah, and it starts actually the architect and engineers.
Okay.
So they'll do what's called construction administration. So we'll actually walk the site as all the construction's going on. So that's a level of quality. Of course, Infinity, so they have the contractors that are doing the work, but Infinity has a team that's the first level of quality control.
Okay.
To go ahead and make sure that it's being done. And then the architects on top of that, commissioning agent on top of that. Yep,
Okay.
so there's multiple levels.
There
Okay.
is one more. The city does certain inspections.
Okay.
All right? So again, we have a third level of inspection. It's actually fourth level of inspection. City comes in, looks at, perfect example, we're gonna do underground utilities. We can't cover those up until the city inspects it, says, hey, all the connections are per code, per building code, all those. So there's a series of building inspections. And that's part of our permit fee. We pay for that, for those inspections.
Okay.
And they can't continue on work until they get that inspection done.
That was gonna be my next question. Okay. All right. Mind is clear. Thank you.
So I just have a question, and then, are you done, or?
I am.
No, I was
Oh.
asking him, was he done?
I'm done for this part, but we want to ask questions about this GMP is where we're.
Well, actually, I have a question about the white stuff, the white book here.
Yes.
So the things that are in here that are not covered, such as the sub drainage, the water spots, the fire hydrants, it says that it's not included, but then it also says that they're not responsible for future curling of the concrete. So are we buying, what type of concrete are we buying that they're saying future curling? I mean, that could be in a year, it could be in 2 years, then who at that point will be responsible for all of these additional things?
Okay, that's in the assumptions and clarifications, correct?
So
Is it-
that is
Yes.
on BP, well, the concrete is on BP 3, the fire hydrants is on page 2.
I'm gonna ask Sean to come up here and explain that.
Okay.
I think that's good.
He knew that was coming.
I thought I could at least come to one meeting and just sit, but it seems like it's part of my,
Come on, Shane.
the fire hydrants, there's none required or shown on the documents. So it's just, if there is anything that's added in the future, they would be incorporated. But those are gonna go through plan review right now with the city. So our contractor in review said there aren't any additional fire hydrants shown. So, we show them, we ask the question, they're not initially needed, so that's why they're not included. Okay? The curling was specific to a detail of how that's how we're gonna address it.
Okay, and then who's gonna pay for the sub drains and the water spots, since it says that it's not covered? Do we pay for that?
That's under the, I'm trying to think what if I don't mind looking. Because,
Sure.
you have it right here? Oh, I'm gonna need my glasses now. Which item was that? Concrete?
So I'm on BP three.
Yep.
But I was also on, yeah. In BP three, it just basically talks about the waterproofing, the sub drainage and things of that, but it specifically says it in bold or italics that this is not a part of it.
I see. I see.
Yes. that one.
To be up top.
Oh, sure.
It's not
That's okay. No.
Oh, you're looking at my scope of work. So
Yeah, that's
why I thought
this is-
Excellent. Okay, good. Yeah, these are, which item in
See, it
particular?
starts on this page here.
So just,
Oh,
so that
yes.
one, you know, and then it talked
So
about
there's a bunch of it.
sub drainage that was not included, so I'm just wondering, if it's not included in this, are we paying for this down the flight? Is it part of the contingency, or is it?
Good question. The way the scopes were written, I write the scopes, I start when the first drawings come out, so the first design development drawings. I'm beginning scope of work, is that determines how I'm gonna put a package together for bidding to ensure that I get the right bidders. So this is more of a clarification, so like the waterproofing item that is on there. Initially in the design development phase, we were budgeting to waterproof the exterior foundation systems. We did not think you needed to do that, so that when we finalized and got the construction drawings and we actually bid the work, we verified with the design team, and they said, that detail doesn't need to be done, we're taking it out. It came out in an addendum that the bidders rebid, but all I did was just clarify it within here. So as far as you're concerned, it's not something that will be an additional cost. It just clarifies the development of the drawings that has already been verified and documented by the design team. But as you'll find out, probably, and Steve and Doug know, I'm very anal, so I cross the Ts, dot the Is multiple times. Just an engineer kind of background, so you're covered in respect to
Okay.
that.
Okay.
The other item that's in here is site lighting. That will be done by the electrical contractor. So I bought concrete work, and so the concrete contractor does not do the concrete foundation light poles. That is done by the electrical contractor because he has to feed them from electrical basis. He has the supports, so he has anchor bolts. And so I sub all that work out to him, so he coordinates his work. He might hire my concrete contractor, or he might bring somebody else in. But it's not being done by the concrete contractor who's doing the slab on grade work for the building, all the sidewalks. So it's just how the market looks at bidding in some of those items and the clarification.
Okay.
That's in your, 33 traders?
33 trade packages,
Okay.
yes, yes. We'll be actually presenting at our next core meeting, the next round of packages and contractors that we'd like to go out and bid. So we're very close to that. We're expecting our final GMP documents. I was supposed to get them today. I'll probably have them tomorrow morning so we can begin that process.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Are there any other questions on GMB 1.2?
So wait, so Sean, I just have one more question.
Sure.
So everything in here, you can stay there, you're good. So everything that's in here that says what the contractor or subcontractor is not doing, you're saying that you have already bidded that out and someone else is doing it?
If I have it, I plan on bidding it out, and someone
Okay.
else is doing it.
Okay.
So it's my, yes, exactly right.
Okay.
So you are the overseer for these 33 traders that you want to contract out, correct?
I'm the guy that builds it in my mind, puts the packages together, so I know how I can get the best competitive pricing on the street to
Okay.
provide you, and then know if I don't have something in this package, I gotta ensure it gets in the other package. Because as Steve and Doug described to you, ultimately as the CMR, we're responsible for that overall package, the overall construction. I'm building you a new school.
Right.
And I'm not gonna come back to you and go, oh, I forgot the concrete.
Okay.
You know?
So you telling us you're gonna cross your Ts and dot your Is?
That is correct.
All right, I'm holding you to that.
You got it.
Any other questions?
Oh, no, I'm done.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions? I'm gonna put this out to the board, and I don't know the official way, Dr. Rock, for GMP 1.2.
So are you ready for us to, my question to you, we can do this one of two ways. You can finish the presentation, or we can pause and go to item 3.2 and ask for a vote to come to the floor.
Either way works for us. We have no preference. So I just put it in the middle because I thought it kind of fit well with the presentation.
Okay.
Talking about GMPs, let's talk about GMP 1. I thought it was a really good discussion.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. I
Very
appreciate that.
So it's up to you. If you would like us to continue, we can continue on with our presentation.
But just so that the board understands, the rest of the presentation doesn't have anything to do with GMP 3, two.
This GMP,
One
that's,
point two.
yes. And that's why I thought it might make sense, but it's just.
If you guys don't mind, we could go ahead and put a motion on the floor for 3.2 to approve the contract for Infinity Construction GMP 2.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to put a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 3.2, the contract for Infinity Construction. It's to review and approve the contract for Infinity, with Infinity Construction related to the new pre-K to 5 building at the Randallwood site.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Before we put the vote on the floor, is there any additional discussion on this one?
Do we have a cost in the motion?
I'm sorry?
Was it a cost in the motion?
Yes.
Well,
I mean, when Mimi.
dollar amount is $9,900,000
$2,000.
$2,511.
Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Moomin,
Yes.
Mrs. Elba,
Yes.
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Motion, yes, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, board. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Now, let's continue. And we're, I know.
Thought we was done.
I know, everybody
It
thought.
didn't apply to this,
Let me,
though.
if you look at the slide,
Oh.
Gets us ahead.
God, I saw that.
segment 2, the middle and high school review. Oh my God, we got to do it all over again. We're not going to make you do that tonight. But I thought it would be important to at least, and we do want to come back. But I thought it would be important to just kind of give you a glimpse of sort of the schedule of where we're going and how we're going to get there. And so I know when I saw how much material we went through for segment 1, I thought, I'm going to kill you. They're going to kill me. And so let's kind of talk about, first, let's talk about consultants to hire, all right? There may be some more consultants on this project because of the sheer size and the types of projects, because we're going beyond just a building. So what we've done, and you as a board have done so far, obviously you have the owner's representative, but we have the POR, which is the Program of Requirements Visioning Consultant, which you approved last month. And so the approval, that consultant has been hired. Now, we're going to hire an architect. We're going to come in front of you. That should be sometime in early fall of this year. We'll go through a whole nother process of another construction manager. Again, we'll be using those state processes to do this. That'll be late fall of next year. We will then have a commissioning agent again, because every project gets a separate one, and that will be late fall of 2019. Early spring of 2020. We'll do a maintenance plan advisor. We'll try to do that a little earlier, because there's one thing I'm hoping to kind of combine the maintenance plan advisor to both projects, because I think that would be helpful, rather than having two separate plan. If we can do it as one piece, and that, if you look at what I showed for this for segment 1, I showed that same time period. We might get a special inspections agent. A lot of that is through the architect, but you have to remember, we're doing bus garage, and we're also gonna be doing a lot of fields, you know, ball fields, things like that. We may need to have some sort of separate piece. And because we're doing a lot of demo, we're going, as you know, we're gonna eventually demo at least the three elementary schools, and there's some demo at the high school. We might need an environmental agent that, it'll possibly be with the AE, but we have to make that decision. We don't have to combine them because of the timing is so much later. And then again, some sort of move consultant. So I wanted you to at least have a list of, hey, who are these consultants that we're gonna be selecting? Any questions on this, on the
Just
consultant?
real quick,
Yes.
so the commissioning agent is like what we just did with Osborne?
Yes,
So we don't have to go through the whole RFP process because they're
Correct.
already decided on, but architect, construction manager will need to do RFPs?
well, wait a minute, let me go back. What we did, we didn't have to do the RFP, but we did get proposals with
Okay.
dollars, and we negotiate. We don't just say, you
Which
got it.
one?
For Osborne,
Okay,
Osborne was
gotcha.
negotiated.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. It's just that we don't have to go through an interview they're already pre-selected,
Gotcha.
pre-qualified.
But
But-
then the architect and the construction.
Oh, we'll have to go through very detailed. That'll be it takes a long time,
Okay, so
and.
it's a detailed bidding
Yeah,
process.
yeah, it's, well, they don't call it a bid, but it's called, let me tell you this, an architect's, it's considered professional services. They don't tell us what their pricing is. But the way we do is we rank them, and if they can't get in line with our budgets, we go to the next guy.
Okay.
All right? On the construction manager, there is a sense of bidding where, if you recall on these GMPs, you see a percentage for the fee. You see a percentage for the, if you look even on that GMP amendment that you just approved, you'll see there's a fee percentage, there is a percentage for the contingency, and there is the general conditions and the staffing. Those were pre-negotiated with Infinity during the selection process. So so there is a sense of bidding. You do get some pricing with that. The reason it takes so long, it's just the way the state processes. They first put out the RFQ, that gets published, it goes into the state system. Everyone has 30 days to put in a proposal, qualifications. Then we all have to meet with the state's group, and we have to rank them and determine, shortlist them. Then we send out the RFP to those shortlisted ones. They get a couple of weeks to put their proposals together. We then have to go through an interview process, and we have to go through a very specific scoring process. So it takes time. It does take time to select the architect and the construction manager.
Steve, we do need to get your owner's rep contract approved by the board.
Yes, well, here's what we have. You've semi-approved it. If you look at our agreement, it says when segment 2, if it gets proposed, we can put a proposal to you. You don't have to go through an RFP process, but we have to,
No, we
yes.
need it for the board.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. We've been working for free on segment 2, so just so you know. But we don't have, you don't have the money yet, so I didn't, I'm not gonna push the board to do this now that the money's available. We're in the process of putting our proposal
Yeah.
together for segment 2.
I just didn't want the board to think that it's totally complete. It
Yeah.
still just needs-
Understood.
It's selected, but it's not negotiated.
Right.
Gotcha.
But I
Yes.
have a question, I just want clarification. The commissioning agent, are we going with Osborne, or will that?
I think we still need to keep the
That's what I
numbers
thought.
tight.
We'd have
Yes.
to go again out.
It's not a interview, we just ask for a proposal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not automatically in?
No.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
No.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
and it wasn't
Not at
clear
all.
because it said complete, so that's why I just kind of assumed that.
No, not for the commissioning
No, if you see for
agency.
segment 2,
That's
are we on
the
segment
Oh, I'm
2?
looking
agent.
at the program
the visioning.
requirements.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
visioning. Visioning is complete.
Completed this one.
That's the only thing that's complete. Yeah. But no, I tell you, it's a big contract, and I don't like to just, we need to negotiate, so we get proposals, and Dennis works that way. He does get proposals, and they were the
Make
lowest.
sure everybody was clear on that.
Yes, that's very good. So we have a lot of consultants to hire to get in this next
And
next
Steve,
round.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Please.
it's probably a good time for you to explain to the board that just because we had GDP on segment 2 doesn't mean they're gonna be the architect on
Right.
this one. Same with
Correct.
construction
Same with
manager,
Infinity.
all of those lists.
Yes.
Or Moody knowing any of them.
It just we start clean.
Right.
We start
Clean slate.
fresh. So there's no one has an inside piece, and that's the right way to do it, because the way this project is broken up into segments, pieces. Now, there's a couple of elements, and I talked to Don about this, is that we may do very independently of the state. And here's an example, bus garage. The bus garage is something that isn't co-funded by the state. We can go and select our own design team and our own construction team. We may put it as part of, I do want to see what it looked like if it was part of the bigger picture of the CM, but we might decide, hey, we might save more money by doing it a little different way. So I will tell you, some of these other projects that we have, which are, bus garage, hopefully we can do early, but some are way farther later. I'd like to get the stadium into the construction with the construction manager because it's so integrated to the school itself. But we have some fields that are pretty far away. We got to tear down a middle school before we can build those fields. Do we hold that construction manager? Would it make more sense to do it a little differently? And so we're going to investigate that.
Okay.
It's a much bigger program that you're doing in the second phase. So then, what we have here is, here's what we have, the pre-construction schedule. We have, basically, we're looking at this summer of completing the program requirements and the visioning. And sometime in this summer, architect gets started in early fall, construction manager late fall, other consultants. We see sort of schematic design really being done sometime in the spring of next year. A design development by the summer, and then starting some sort of start the construction in late fall of 2020. That's what we're looking at. Now, one of the things that's a little different on this is we're building behind the high school. So the high school is going to stay in operation. This building is going to stay in operation as they build it, and obviously the middle school is going to stay in operation. So but it is going to be built pretty close. So we're going to have to work out some really good logistics and safety, making sure the students are safe on this site. And then, we had this. We figure mobilization in winter 2021, high school construction 2021, completion. We see summer for demolition of 2022 because of where that all works. Then high school occupancy in fall of 2022. Build the connections would also be, we have to phase the connecting pieces because we got to tear down a building and then connect. And then we see, we kind of looking at letting the high school students first occupy, then do the demo, get the connections, and then move the middle schoolers. So we're not putting everybody on the site, because that's going to be a lot of students on the site. And then, so that's why we see 2 occupancies, first high school, then middle school, which is preferable. You want to get the high school kids in as early as possible, so they have the benefit of using the high school. And then we have the project closeout, and then I can't tell you, that we haven't really looked at the schedule yet on all these post-construct, which is bus garage fields, the demo, things of that nature. And then, these are the post-construction projects we're looking at. We're looking at the stadium, the baseball and softball fields, site improvements, including Northfield Crossing, which, by the way, have you all seen what the ACE students put together for your students?
Yes.
Thing? And they're getting an award next week, which is really exciting. And I wish we could afford it, but they should be really commended what they've done. The bus garage, and then we have the abatement and demolition, existing middle school, existing elementaries, and portion of high school. And that brings us to the end. And first of all, we want to thank you. And Doug, do you want to say any final comments? Thank you for letting us do this. I really appreciate it. I actually was kind of really excited about doing this today. And we want to come back, because I think we've got to refresh ourselves. You can't, you can't remember all of this information all at once. Great.
I just want to thank you very much for coming. I know that there have been so many questions when we were first getting started on this, and in my thought, the only way to resolve some of those questions was to have you come and educate us.
Yeah, thank
So I tried to listen to what was coming forth from various board members, and so I truly appreciate you for coming. 'cause
We
I know-
appreciate being here.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I really enjoy working with the district. We've
So
got a
can
great
I-
district here.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes,
before we
please.
depart? Because I missed this. Why are we tearing down all 3 elementary buildings?
Well,
Because we have a church in one, and I don't recall us even discussing that we were gonna tear all 3 down. But that may not be a question for you, that
yeah,
may be,
that's,
okay, that's a
it.
question for this board,
We
okay.
have,
And it
let me
can
tell you
wait.
this, Ms. Elba, we have the monies available, and they are co-fundable demolition, so we took the money and we put them down on the master plan. That's your decision as a board, what you eventually do. And a lot of boards do change their mind. But we thought it would be good, and I'll tell you why I wanted the money. Sometimes they'll let us move the money somewhere else, okay, on something else.
So the demolition of the buildings, that conversation has not came up with the board, but due to the ONCC and the charter school policy, the board has options to either tear the building down, hold them unoccupied, or sell them. If you sell them,
You gotta
then
sell
you
it
have
to the
offer
charter
them to
school.
sell it to the charter school. So those conversations will have to come to the board on what happens to the 3 buildings. But we have 3 choices. We can sell them, we can keep them, and unoccupied, we can demolish.
Oh, and Mr. Charlie, there's 2 more options if we need them. Well, I guess that's the keeping.
Right, keep it.
We may need them for program, or if other things happen with the Board of
Overflow. If we
Education
need more
offices.
students, we probably should keep the building for more students if they come to the district.
But it hasn't been determined.
Right, let me get
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
You guys, thanks for working.
you guys.
Thank you.
I'm just a little anxious to get started.
I know, same here.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
so I'm learning. I'm truly learning of what it takes to build a school district. A lot of work. You guys have a lot of work.
We appreciate the trust that you have in us.
Oh,
We really do appreciate
yeah.
that. It is a great district. You know, you see these students like A students, and
Mhm.
the visioning, and that, for me, has been a real eye-opener. These are kids who are really deserving of these new communities.
Thank you for saying
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rock has removed the item number 4. Do we have any correspondence?
No.
Before we go to adjournment, Dr. Rock did share this regarding CUBE. We talked about CUBE as a board. It is September 26th through the 28th in Miami, Florida. He said that they received a notice today or yesterday that the housing opens in June. So we've already shared who was and wasn't going to CUBE. So as soon as housing opens, I guess our ask would be that you and Alicia will work to make sure that we are in the,
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to nail down, just to make sure who is going.
so, I don't have that agenda with me. I believe, I thought all 5 no, Michelle, did you say you were going? Yeah, I thought it was all 5 of us. Ms. Barber was
I'm
up in
not.
the air because it's in Miami.
I'm not
You're not gonna go.
So it'll be the 4 of us.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sorry, that's just me. I just wanted to prep, because when the opening comes up, then we could get the earlier prices,
Absolutely.
get in at the right hotel and everything. Okay,
Even our
thank you.
flights, get our flights as low as possible. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Jolly, are there any district announcements?
I just want to announce the STEAM Fair, that's Wednesday, May 8th, and it'll be located here at the high school. And also, our Cmr performance will be Friday, May 17th, here at the high school. It's a combination of middle and high school students. And then the groundbreaking on May 25th. But that's also coinciding with the Alumni Association's all class reunion. There's flyers available online, and I believe we have some at the rest.
Any other?
I'm going to be judging senior, things Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week.
Projects?
Yeah, we are presenting, and I was asked to be a judge Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
If anybody else interested, just let me know.
If you could send us out the information.
Okay.
Just send it out.
All right, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any other announcements?
I do have a question, Madam Chair. Did we ever get anything back from our board retreat from Ms. Keys, right? Did she send us anything or something?
She did not share that she was gonna, you mean like how she encapsulated it? She didn't share that she was going to do that. I don't think that this retreat called for that.
Okay.
It was our personal takeaways.
Okay.
If you guys want some type of summary, I can ask her if she do one.
I just didn't know if she sent.
No, if she had, I would have sent it to you guys. Did you guys want a summary of sorts?
I don't need one.
Yeah, that was more for our personal
I'm
I got you.
fine. I got my
edification to
takeaway.
continue working on our own selves. Well, I hope today helped. It was a help for me, so I appreciate this time. If there are no further,
Just quick amount, I'm sorry. I will not be at graduation, just want to put that on the record. And I anticipate being back in time for the meeting in June.
okay,
And you might want to check, I don't know if you said anything to them, but nobody's reached out about gowns, so I
I
guess you
think
guys have that under control.
if I can please, I ran into, I think it was Ms. Berlin. One of them, they asked if our gown sizes were changing, and I told her I didn't think so. So if you've heard something different,
Nope, I just heard they were ordering whatever we had last
yeah,
year, reordering it
so
this year.
yes, just reorder what we had before. I sure will, yeah. Yep. It's probably been ordered already, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, Madam Chair, I do.
Mhm.
Everybody did get the invitation for the retirees, our educators?
Yeah, I will not be in
Yeah.
attendance for that.
It's during the middle of the workday, a little bit difficult.
I will be there.
I will be in attendance.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
it.
Without further ado, if I can have a motion to adjourn the May 2nd work session meeting.
Oh, yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Elba?
Yes.
Mrs. Moomin?
Yes.
Mrs. Gator?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes, meeting is adjourned.
Good night.